Okay, here we're finding measures of variability and outliers for a set of data. Here we have a given set of data that are 8, 3, 9, 14, 12, 11, 20, 23, 5, and 26. The first step whenever you're doing something like this is to put in order from least to greatest all of the numbers in your given data set, and I've done that for you here and spread them out a little bit so they're easier to read. The next thing that you're going to want to do is to find the median. It's not really something you need to do, actually. I just like to do it just because I've had a habit. Crisscross the greatest and least numbers, or least and greatest, whichever order you want to do that in. And as you go through, you're going to come down to the situation where we actually have two numbers in the middle. Basically, that means we had an even number set. If you had an odd number set, it would have been the middle number, and that would have been it. But if there's two numbers, what you have to do is you have to take the average of those two numbers, and in this case it's 11.5. Of course, you could have just eyeballed it and said halfway between 11 and 12 is 11.5, but that's the median. The next thing you want to do is you want to find the quartiles. Before we find quartiles, we kind of want to get rid of all of the x's that we just did so that we can do some more work here. Because what we basically have to do is we have to find now the quartiles are basically the medians of this lower half of information and the upper half of information. So what we're going to do first is we're going to put brackets around the upper half, and we're going to find the median of just those 5 numbers. In this case, the median is, of course, 8. So that we're going to call the first quartile, or Q1. The second bracket, or the upper 5 numbers, the middle number there is, of course, 20. And that number 20 we're going to call the third quartile, or Q3. Interestingly enough, you're going to ask, well, why don't we have a Q2? That technically is the median. That's the second quartile, or Q2, but we just call it the median. But technically, that's that. All right. The next thing you're going to want to do is find what they call the interquartile range, or IQR for short. The interquartile range is simply the third quartile minus the first quartile, Q3 minus Q1. In our case, it's 20 minus 8, or just 12. The next part is a little bit tricky. We now have most of the information that we need for measures of variability. We just want to test for something called outliers. Outliers are numbers that are either way too high or way too low for the given data set. In this case, we need to find what they call an outlier factor. It's a number that we're going to either add to the greatest quartile or subtract from the lowest quartile to figure out our limits of outliers. In our case, there's a number that you always multiply by, and it's 1.5. I didn't come up with that number. They just statistically have come up with that. And in our case, it's 1.5 times 12, which is the interquartile range. And when we figure that out, it's actually 18. And now what we're going to do is find our minimum and maximum number that we can't go above or below without calling numbers outliers. So we're going to say, all right, the minimum number is the first quartile minus 18, which is this case is 8 minus 10, so that's negative 10. Our upper quartile is going to be, or our upper threshold is going to be Q3 plus 18, or 38. 20 plus 18 is 38. We basically do not want a number that's lower than negative 10 or higher than 38 now. Since neither one of our numbers are in the outlier area, all of these numbers are within the safe area, we therefore can conclude that we have absolutely no outlier here. I hope that's helpful. I'm going to try to do another set soon, but for now, that's the measures of variability and finding outliers, how to find out if you do have outliers. Okay. Okay, so I'm working on number 2 from the 10-2 homework, measures of variability homework worksheet. I've listed all of the data as they gave it, in the order that they gave it, and I want to show everybody how to use this and get the answers using Excel. The first thing you might want to do is just put these all in order. In order to do that, you just highlight everything, and you go up to Data, and hit Sort, And usually it goes smallest to largest. It doesn't matter. You click OK, and it automatically organizes everything. The first thing you want to find out is the mean, or the median rather. So you just say, all right, the median is the middle number. In our case, you've actually got an even number of numbers, so it's going to be halfway between 11 and 12, which is just 11.5. Now, once you know that, you can then find the quartiles. We're going to find our quartile number 1 and our quartile number 3. Because we had an even number of numbers total, we are going to use both 11 and 12 for our quartiles. So using that, the first quartile then would be the middle number of the first 5 numbers, which would be 8. And the third quartile would be the middle number of the second half group there, which would be 20. Your interquartile range is just simply REQR is just equal to your third quartile minus your first quartile. In this case, that would be 12. So far we've got our quartiles, we have our median, and we have our interquartile range. By the way, if they did ask you for your overall range, that is just equal to your overall biggest number minus your overall smallest number. So in our case, it's 23. So the last thing is the outlier. You have to find your outlier factor. Your outlier factor is equal to 1.5 times whatever your interquartile range is. In our case, that's 12, which equals 18. Now that is the magic number that you have to factor into both your lower quartile and your upper quartile. If we subtract 18 from our lower quartile, we get a number of -10 that we can't go below without being an outlier. If we add 18 to our upper quartile, we get a number of 38, which we can't go above without being an outlier. So in our case, because our lowest number is 3 and our highest number is 26, we don't come even close to hitting either one of our outlier number factors, so there is no outlier in this data set. So the major pieces of information that they want are your first quartile, which again is in this case is 8, your third quartile, which in this case was 12 or 20 rather, your interquartile range is 12. You need to find your outlier factor, which we figured out to be 18, and state whether or not there is indeed an outlier. Using that, we figured out that the outlier factor numbers were both -10 and 38, which in both cases was well within, our numbers were well within those outlier numbers, so we determined that there was absolutely no outlier. Okay, hope this helps. Have a fantastic day.